We like to call it the Supernatural Hour. And now, our hosts.
Hey, I am your host, Raven.
This is Doc.
This is Chad.
And you're at the Supernatural Hour, by the way.
Hey, yeah, we are.
Just in case you wondered. Chad's giving me this look.
Is that what this is?
Chad's looking at me like, you are an idiot. It is finals week, folks. Well, this is my last regular week, and then next week's finals. So the brain's a little mush. I mean, it's the heart of Christmas, folks. Your shopping should be done. You should have a couple parties under your belt by now. You know what? Before we go too much further, I just want to say that Rogue, Emmett, and Jess aren't here with us today, and we miss them. They will be back. They just have some other things going on. They haven't quit on us. Just again, December, Christmassy, it gets tough. I teach piano lessons, and literally in December, because I know nobody is going to practice, we literally just play Christmas songs.
And it's Christmassy.
I say just work on the Christmas songs. Don't kill yourself trying to practice because you're not going to. So anyway, we get it. But when you listen to this, Heart of Christmas, you're going to have your chocolate Nate, your chocolate countdown to Christmas, your advent calendar is going to be half gone by now. So we're going to talk about some true Christmas paranormal experiences.
Okay.
Doc, what?
I said I can't wait.
Can't wait. Last Christmas, that sounds like a song. I won't sing it for you.
I gave you my heart.
You shouldn't sing that song either.
But the very next day, you gave it away.
Gave it away, exactly.
I'm going to be honest. Least favorite Christmas song ever.
You know, is that
only
one?
Because, yeah, well, you just think, like, the decision-making of that individual was terrible, right?
Yes.
Just like you gave your heart to someone, and then the very next day, they gave it away. And then a year later, you think they wouldn't recognize you. That song's messed up. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, there's some trauma going on there. And followed closely by Christmas Shoes, which the sentiment is sweet, but it's like, and I realize that Christmas isn't all happy Santa, jolly old elves things, but I don't know. It's kind of a downer song for Christmas time.
My wife's least favorite song is Simply Having a Wonderful Christmas Time by Paul McCartney.
Really?
Why is that?
I don't know. It's something about that tune that just...
Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it definitely grinds.
Yeah,
every time that comes on, my wife gives me side eye and just looks at me like I did it on purpose.
Okay. You know, when it comes, I'm going to start off. Do you want to start off with a personal Christmas?
Yes.
Or do you want that to be the...
No, I want to start off with the personal Christmas story because this is one that is a true paranormal Christmas experience that you have had.
I can verify that this one is true because I've been there. My mom, you've heard me talk about my mom a time or two on the podcast. She has 5 sisters, so there's 6 girls. Every Christmas, we go to my hometown and we have a Christmas party. And they used to have this Christmas party in the place that they referred to as the Green Church.
And that's because it was a church and it was painted green.
It was painted green. So
very creative.
Yeah, if you've listened to us for any amount of time, you know that I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which most people still refer to as the Mormons. And most LDS churches look roughly the same. This one in particular is very, very old, and for whatever reason, I don't even know when it was built.
It's got to be in the 20s or 30s.
At least. They decided to make it green. And it's not just it's not one of these whites that you go, oh, that kind of has a green hue to it.
Yeah, it's like stuccoed and then painted.
It's like pistachio green.
Yeah. Light pistachio green.
Get your pistachio ice cream cone. That's the color green this church is. So everyone in town called it the Green Church. Trevor, your wife is from the Payson area.
Her family is, yes.
Her family is. Have you seen the Green Church?
I can guarantee you we've been past the Green Church. We've done many a family activity in Payson.
Yes, and
that church is.
And if I remember right, where her family is from is they probably went to that church, based on where they lived. That probably. Next time you see her, ask her about the Green Church. She'll tell you.
I will.
I don't think the LDS Church owns that building anymore, to be honest with you.
Have they recently sold it? It would have been in the last few years.
Yeah, because we don't have our family parties there anymore. It's been 2 or 3 years since we've had our parties there. We have them at my mom's church now. But we digress. Here we go. So the Green Church, built in roughly the 1920s, 1930s. You walk inside, the old, really pretty wood. I think in the chapel they had a stained glass window, if I remember right. And we just your normal family party stuff. You eat, you sing poorly, you play some games, pass out some presents. What are you laughing about?
Have family angst about the next family party that's going on there this Christmas.
Oh, we won't even go into that. Yeah, my cousins and I decided that we were done with the talent show. And so we took over the activities and we nixed the talent show. And the aunties, they're not happy about it. But the cousins are thrilled. Okay.
It's the next generation taking
Well, it's okay.
over.
So off topic. So off topic. This is Chad's fault. This is Chad. We will get back to ghosts, I promise you. The first couple of years they did the talent show, it was fantastic because everyone prepared for it and was prepared. And then it kind of just
Digressed. It
Devolved.
horribly devolved into Auntie going, "Oh, come on up here, my little granddaughter. You can sing. Come on up here. Oh, come on. Come sing Frosty the Snowman for us." And then they would go up there dragging their feet, not prepared.
No preparation, no
forgotten
music.
half the words. No, it turned into just a horrible, horrible nightmare. Anyway, but this
sounds like time to nix the talent show.
yeah, so we had to forcibly nix it. The next generation took over. All right, we're going to play bingo. Oh, okay. Anyway, not my decision. So, but this church is definitely haunted. I have had several people, you walk in and in the area, the basketball court, which is where we have the party.
The family party and dinner.
The cultural hall.
The cultural hall. That, you don't really feel anything there, but you go back into the bathroom and then the little kids, they're in the church. It's late at night. There's not Sunday school or primary and they can go wander around. And so they run around and so then you have to go hunt down your kids. And so you're walking in the dark parts of the church trying to find your kids. And you get back there when it's dark and, church isn't going on. And you can definitely feel some spirits. I've had cousins come up to me, while we're there, and they're like, "Deanne, you got to come back here. You got to come back in this corner. Tell me what you feel." So we go back there. It's like, "Oh yeah, hey, there's a ghost. It's a woman." And again, I would love to ghost hunt that church. If you're not our Patreon, you should be, because we just recorded our Patreon only episode and I talked about my haunted church. Not at Christmas time, at a different time, but going back to the haunted Green Church, I bet you we've had our family party there 20 years or more.
As long as I've known you.
And before that, at least 20 years, maybe 25 years we've had it there. And almost every year, one of my cousins or one of my aunts or one of my uncles, has had someone touch them or walk past them. I think the most recent one I heard the last time we were there, it was my sister, had a spirit whisper to her in the bathroom. And one of the interesting things is I was researching some other, true Christmas ghost stories. And one of the things about spirits is they are usually attracted, or not usually, they are often attracted to, excited energy, nervous energy. So Christmas time is one of those perfect times to draw in, spirits, because they're just really jiving off of, think of everything. You've got adults that are stressing out, because you got to get this wrapped and you got to get that bought. And am I going to have enough money? And how are we going to go to little Jimmy's party and Aunt Gertrude's party? They're on the same day. You got kids that are so excited for Santa and they get too much sugar at school and just a lot going on.
The days are getting shorter. You get back into that whole, Yule kind of situation where a lot of people A lot of traditions think that that's a time when the spirit world is a lot closer to us because of the, the short days and things that may pay into it also, that things are a lot darker.
Right.
And in December too, you're going to get storms.
Yeah, I was gonna mention. I mean, that's kind of the whole symbol of Christmas, right? Is that we're at the darkest time of the year, the winter solstice, and finally you have the light that pierces the darkness. That's the Star of Bethlehem. That's the birth of the Savior. That's the birth of the Son God, the Son of God, however you want to spin it. But there's this interesting mix of emotions because you got that ultimate point of despair. Things are the darkest they're going to be, and then the light comes. And so what a roller coaster of emotions that's possible during this time of year.
Right. And you think the winter solstice is December 21st, and you're looking at Christmas Eve as the 24th. That's only 3 days. And I think every day you get 7 more minutes of sun. That's only 21 minutes away from, being the darkest night of the year. So it's definitely dark. I know it's getting dark now at like
5 o'clock.
earlier than 5 o'clock, like 4:58. So Chad, you had some ghost stories. Do you want to start us off with one?
Yeah, well, I did some research, did some things on YouTube, looked up some interesting areas, and there's one that one of the videos that I quite enjoyed. It was called Christmas Ghost Stories by the Fire, and these are purported to be actual, not literature ghost stories, but events that have happened to people. And this is a little different. We did an episode last year about Christmas ghost stories and how they were popular in Dickens, and we may touch on that a little bit later in this episode too, because we've got some more information on those. But what we wanted to talk about here today was like what Raven just talked about, is things that have happened, Christmas-related paranormal events, Christmas-related ghost stories. And this video, Christmas Ghost Stories by the Fire, was really interesting. It was only about 30 minutes, and they had 5 or 6 different ghost stories that they talked about. One of them talked about, I think it was in the 17 or 1800s, a family who were merchants. They made pies, and then they'd go to market and they'd sell pies, and that was, how they made their money. But they also watched what everybody else was doing merchant-wise, and who was selling the most and who was doing the most. And they would then send part of the family out, and they would then rob the people that were doing the best.
Well, okay.
So, not only did they make their money on their pies, then they made their money being highwaymen and robbing, other people for doing that. The story goes with this pieman and the family. They did that. They actually ended up catching them, and this was, doing it all year round, but they caught him around Christmas. They caught him, I think it was like on the 27th or 28th in the holiday seasons. And they ended up putting a spike through this guy because he had actually, not just robbed people, but they'd killed people to take their money. And so that's it. So there's, and I forget the name of the town, but there's still a post there that is the post that is supposed to be the one that the spike him. And then they see him around Christmas time haunting the area. So I thought that was quite an interesting story that's purported to have a factual basis to it, and not just a literature story.
So one of the stories that I had was, and it didn't have names, so I don't have names. I don't have anyone to credit this to. So if you know this person, we're not trying to steal their experience. There was a gentleman, he was about 8 or 9, and it was on Christmas Eve, and he saw something really weird. And he says that even though it was years and years ago, because he's an adult now, he says he remembers it like it was yesterday. He was at that age where Santa was still a very important part of his life, and he was excited for Santa to come. I mean, it's Christmas Eve, right? And he doesn't go into what his Christmas Eve ritual is, but I'm assuming that he had one. I mean, most people do, and he's excited, and Santa Claus is coming. And I don't know if you guys remember being little, but just having a really, really difficult time going to sleep, right?
Yeah.
Was that a shocker?
Yeah, that one shocks me. I can't imagine any little kids not wanting to go to sleep on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
They're all candied up.
Yeah, my great aunt would come over and we would stay up all night. My mom and dad would get mad because we would be tired, but she was so excited that she'd stay up and tell us stories, and we would be so exhausted on Christmas Eve. But it was fun, and that's one of my greatest memories. So anyway, he finally fell asleep, but then he was woken up to footsteps, and he heard these footsteps in his room, and he was for sure it was Santa. And so he's laying there awake because he says wasn't asleep long, but he said these footsteps were loud enough for him to hear, and it woke him up. And he said he was terrified, and the reason he was terrified was because he knew it was Santa Claus, and he thought, if I open my eyes, Santa Claus is going to see that I'm awake, and a couple of things are going to happen. His magic is going to go away, or
he's not going to give you presents.
He's not going to give you any presents, or he's going to leave. He's all these things. And so he says he laid there for probably about 5 or 10 minutes. And finally, he decided to just crack one eye open, just a little bit. And he says he barely opened one eye, but he saw a black figure standing over the bed, staring down at him. And he said this figure was about 6 feet tall, completely dark, looked blacker than black. He said the figure had no eyes, no mouth, no nose, but a very clear outline of a head, body, arms, legs. And he said, as an 8 or 9-year-old, he's like, well, this is a bigger figure. It's got to be Santa.
It's Christmas Eve.
It's Christmas Eve. It's Santa. And, it's making sense. He says this figure stayed stationary for about 10 or 15 seconds, and then it came a few steps closer and kind of leaned in towards him. And stayed another 10 or 15 seconds. And he says, I couldn't see his face, but I knew it was looking at me. He's like, think of that weird feeling that someone's watching you.
Mm-hmm.
He says he kind of got creeped out. So he closed his eyes for a few seconds. And then when he opened them, the figure was gone. But he didn't hear, he says, I was little, but he says I was old enough to think I didn't hear that person walk out of the room. And he says, we didn't live in a brand new, carpeted home. He says, our home was old. It had wood floors. They creaked. The doors creaked. Everything creaked. He said, this entity that I saw left silently. He says he never saw the figure again, but other things happened in the same house. So in the morning, after Christmas and everything, he asked his mom if she saw Santa go in his room last night. And he says, I remember her looking at me very, very confused. And then kind of, playing along with it. He says, I was little, but I remember her kind of looking at me like, what? So he knew it wasn't Santa. He knew it wasn't a dream. He's like, I know it wasn't a dream. I wasn't
He didn't
asleep.
have a good vibe about it.
Didn't feel too jolly.
Yeah, no jolliness going on there.
Yeah, that's not...
His story sounds a lot like sleep paralysis, but he didn't mention whether or not he was able to move. But that's a very classic story, is seeing a shadow figure or something dark, not being able to really see good features, and that creeping in on you, basically getting super close to you, is a very common experience for people who have sleep paralysis. But I don't know if he was able to move or not, or if he was literally just laying in bed thinking, "Oh my gosh, it's Santa Claus." But or is it? I've had similar experiences. I've talked about it before on the podcast, where I've had an episode of sleep paralysis, and it was one of the most terrifying things ever. So something to think about.
Yeah, definitely. You had some more that you're going to
Yeah,
share
another
with us,
story
Chad.
off this Christmas, Ghost Stories by the Fire. And I've heard this one a couple of times, and it's a story about a Ukrainian family that had, I believe, moved to America. And this was in the early 1800s or late 1800s even. They had a child that had died at the age of 2. And they're getting ready for their Christmas Eve dinner. And apparently the tradition, as they explain it, is they set out, lots of food for lots of people to come and visit during the holiday seasons. Doc, you may be a little more aware of that with some of the Ukrainian, Russian traditions of those kinds of things, of the hospitality and Christmas. Do you have any light to shed on that?
As far as just kind of hospitality or traditions that they
Yeah, the
do?
Christmas edition hospitality. Would it be?
Uh,
They basically said, it was a Christmas Eve dinner that they had set out, and
mhm.
they generally set some plates out and things up for, for guests, for people that might just arrive.
Right.
Not necessarily, when I say invited guests, not uninvited, but just like
Just
we are
in
at the
case,
holidays. We have more than we
placeholder.
need. We have a bunch.
Yeah, probably it's more of a symbol of abundance than anything, right? That you have excess, that you have enough to be generous with, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and they were all, wondering, is anybody going to come? The children they were excited for Christmas. They were excited for people to come, and all of a sudden, all the children started saying, "Billy has come. Billy has come." And the mother was like, "Huh?" Because Billy was their 2-year-old child that had died 2 years earlier, and all of the children saw Billy, and Billy had been there for hours. They said, the mother couldn't see him, and she was very disappointed, but didn't disbelieve the children on what they were seeing. And it was like, oh, Billy's here, Billy has come, and it's quite a story in the way they did it. And years later, they said, even up to, it was like 87 years later, as the children that were there, are dying out. They never recanted that story. That was something that they did, and the mother always wanted, Billy to come, and she felt like, she didn't disbelieve the children. She just was disappointed that she didn't get to see Billy. So I thought that was an interesting with the children and being able to see that. And oftentimes I think children are more perceptive, and may have seen it where the parent may not have been able to see it.
Right. Especially where this time of year there's such a emphasis on familial connection, right? Connecting with your family, both family that's here, family that was. I mean, that's kind of the purpose of tradition, right? Is to pass down the old ways, to connect with our ancestors, or in this case,
Heritage.
to family that's maybe passed on as well. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I could assume there would be a lot of energy for an experience like that as well.
Yeah, so I have another story, and it's a girl. She was 19 years old. She moved back in with her dad. She had originally just lived a few blocks from him in a small town. And again, I don't know. They didn't. I found the story online, but it's not credited to anybody. So if this is you or someone you know, my apologies. I would credit you if I knew who you were. He decided to move across country, and very last minute, she decided that she wanted to move with him because she didn't want to be alone. So because of this last minute decision, her dad's house wasn't big enough, as far as finished bedrooms, but there was a room in the basement that he finished up for her, and she said it was gorgeous. He finished up this great room. So she moves in. Well, the problem with her is, it's not really a problem, but I believe she was sensitive because she said that she was always hearing things and seeing things, and no one in her family really believed her. They said that, she just had this overactive imagination. She would hear weird noises in the attic, and she says, I was a little paranoid. She said, I always imagined that someone was living up there because she had seen a movie where people had, someone was living in their attic and they didn't know about it. Her brain just always jumped to the worst possible conclusion. And I thought, hey, she sounds like me. Rather than a more realistic reason, like, hey, it's an old house. Maybe it creaks when the wind blows, or maybe there's a mouse or a squirrel in the attic. Her brain went to, there's, a serial
Someone
killer.
living in the attic.
A serial killer lives in the attic that I don't know about. Because of these worries, no one ever believed her when she would tell them things, right? So she said, it's kind of that adult that was scared of monsters. So she had just moved in, to her dad's house, and her sister lived there as well. And it's Christmas Eve. She was just kind of chilling, She said the way she described it, she was playing with her hair and scrolling through Facebook. And all of a sudden, she heard something heavy scrape against her carpet. She says it sounded like someone was pulling, heavy, heavy furniture. And she looked over, and she said it was a gorgeous room that her dad had made, but it wasn't humongous. And she said, I looked over, and she kind of thought, oh, did I leave my bedroom door open? And one of the animals came in, and they're making a weird noise. But she said, no, the door was shut. No animals were in. And again, did I say it was Christmas Eve when this was happening?
I believe so.
Yeah, it's Christmas Eve. So that's why that's why this is on this show. Anyway, so she looked around, her heart's pounding. She's looking around. There's no animals in her room. Her windows are shut. Doors are shut. There's nothing in the closet. But she's still spooked, because she's had all these experiences and, tended to be scared of these experiences because her head always went to the very worst case scenario. And so she decided to go to the kitchen and get a glass of water. And as she was going to the kitchen, she said, you have to remember, I just moved in. And she said, most of my clothes were in these laundry baskets, plastic laundry baskets. And she said, as I got up to leave my room, she said, the laundry baskets it looked like, she says, I physically, with my own eyeballs, saw the clothes in my laundry basket shift and move. The laundry baskets moved. She says, it looked like somebody was picking the laundry up and moving it around like they were looking for something, like you're thumbing through it trying to find that one t-shirt that you want to wear. And she says it looked like somebody picked up a stack, moved it over to the other side of the laundry bin, which then she said the laundry bin was sitting on a counter and it, wasn't on all the way. And so then the tote fell off the counter. It scared her. Again, no animals, were around. So she was like, yeah, I'm done. So she went upstairs, got her drink of water. Her sister asked her what the deal was, and she told her. And the sister laughed at her, and brought her a blanket and pillow so she could sleep on the couch because no one believed her because she was always paranoid about something. But she says, I know what I saw, and she doesn't really talk about it to her family because she didn't want to be labeled as immature.
Interesting.
There are worse things to be labeled. Immature.
Right. Right. So yeah, my gut feel is she's sensitive and
Saw something.
and sees something and hears things. So
Okay. So another story off this Christmas Ghost Stories by the Fire that I thought was kind of interesting. There was a story of a young woman who had a baby, and she, I believe this is in Europe in the late 1700s or early 1800s. And her husband had been, called out to go to war. It was Christmas Eve. He had been gone. It was Christmas Eve, and she was going somewhere to visit with her baby. And as she was going there, troops from the other faction found her and her baby and did unspeakable things to her and killed her and her baby. She is known as the Black Lady of Bradley Woods.
Oh, I watched this with you.
Uh-huh.
I don't think they killed the baby. They just took the baby.
They took the baby. The victim, this crime happened on Christmas Eve, and it was quite interesting. And she is purported to be seen at Christmas Eve, that time of year, in this area, calling for her baby. And they say that you can make her appear if you will say, Black lady, I have stolen your baby 3 times, and she will appear.
Yeah, I don't want her to appear because I think bad things will happen.
Yeah, you want a pissed off black lady looking for her baby?
I am not going to be saying, hey, I took your baby. No, you're going to die.
So that is purported to be a true paranormal Christmas story.
Wow.
Let's talk a little bit about paranormal Christmas, the Nativity. Yeah, one of the other interesting paranormal Christmas stories is probably one that you're all familiar with if you think about it this way, and you may not have ever thought about it this way, but it would be the Nativity and the actual Christmas story. Think about that from the paranormal aspects. You've got angels, you've got visions, you've got all sorts of things, rocks that are singing, visitations, heavenly messengers. In many ways, the whole Christmas season could be happening because of, when we talk about paranormal, supernatural, paranormal, extra normal things that happened. And you definitely have to say that the Christmas story is a supernatural, paranormal experience.
Right, because people, the shepherds had angels appear to them And, and whether or not you're religious and believe it, the story is still there. And you can say, oh, it's a real story. You can say, oh, it's just a fable story. But, they had angels appear to them and people heard heavenly hosts singing. I won't sing for you because, as we all know, I'm a terrible singer. But, Hosanna, Hosanna.
Glory to God in the highest.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Yeah, lots of things. And we've had on some recent podcasts and some YouTube things, we've had some things posted about angels and fallen angels, and we're going to talk about Krampus and some of the other things around those angels. But the whole Christmas story in and of itself is a supernatural, extraordinary, paranormal kind of an event.
Mm-hmm.
And it's documented. And so I don't think that people really think about it that way of it as being paranormal, but it certainly meets the definition of paranormal.
Yep, absolutely.
You get those ancient alien theorists who would put an extraterrestrial spin on the nativity as well, right? Where an angel comes and visits Mary and says she's going to have a baby. She ends up having a baby, and there's this bright star in the sky. Is it a UFO? What is it? And then, like you talked about, heavenly hosts, angels, a lot of times extraterrestrial, ancient astronaut theorists would claim that maybe this was actually an alien encounter. Not trying to be sacrilegious, but that is one of the theories behind the birth of Christ and the nativity.
And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Does it talk about no daylight for 3 days in the Bible after Christ was born? Or is that just a Book of Mormon thing?
That was his death, and that would have been on the American continent.
No, that was 3 days of darkness. I'm talking 3 days of light.
I don't remember that.
I don't think that's in the Bible.
So that might be a Book of Mormon thing. If you are not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, there is that little tidbit in the Book of Mormon.
Is that the sign that Samuel, the Lamanite, got that Christ had been born in Jerusalem, in Bethlehem? Was that there were 3 days of light? So that's where you're going with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that, and again,
I don't know if it was 3 days. It might have been a day, but
I thought it was 3 days. Yeah.
I don't remember.
Apparently, I need to read my scripture a little bit more. Because
No,
I'm kind of defunct. But I mean, this is something that just came to me. I thought, no, wait a minute. So again, whether or not you believe that, you could say, oh, the Book of Mormon's crap. Ooh, even just saying that, I feel so sacrilegious. I'm going to be struck by lightning. But whether or not you believe that, that is also just a paranormal tale. I mean, that there is no
natural accounting for that.
Natural accounting for no, and whether it was 3 days or
1 day
or one full day, how would you account for that? It's a supernatural. Is it aliens? Is it God? That's up to each of you listeners to decide. But it definitely is a Christmas paranormal event because it does happen when
Christ
was born.
Yep.
So
that was an interesting spin on it that I hadn't thought about.
I hadn't either. I'm glad you brought it up.
I'm sure there are a lot of other paranormal events. One of the other videos on YouTube that I didn't get to see, and they've got like 4 hours of it, it's called 37 True Scary Christmas Stories to Jingle Your Bells. These are Christmas stories that are purportedly, again, to be actual events that have happened, and there's about 4 hours of that. So if you're into this kind of stuff and interested in that, that might be something to look at. All right. Well, that's all we've got for this time. Go out and get your Supernatural Hour swag at advancedparanormal.com. There's all sorts of stuff out there. You can listen to our podcasts. You can get all sorts of stuff there. So go to advancedparanormal.com. We talked about our YouTube and TikTok a little bit. Our YouTube, we're up to 313 subscribers. TikTok, we're over 2,200. Appreciate if you haven't already subscribed. Go out and do that and get your friends too.
And by the next podcast that you hear, we should have our January event set up and tickets up. So hopefully we can talk about that by our next podcast.
That will have some real business?
Yep.
All right.
Hey, our other business was real business. It just wasn't necessarily paranormally business.
That's correct.
It was giving and thoughtful business. All right. Stay spooky, my haunty friends.
Have a good one.
Hey, have a good night and a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
You've been listening to the Supernatural Hour at AdvancedParanormal.com. The Supernatural Hour is part of the Radio Ronin network found at radioronin.com. Copyright by Advanced Paranormal Services.